Hello everyone, and this is an introduction to Houdini. So this is a training series I've been planning to make for a while because none of my commercial training is applicable for beginners, like absolute beginners. Like if you have no knowledge of Houdini at all, I don't think you should buy any of my trainings because they all require at least some functioning knowledge of Houdini. Okay, like the basic user interface and how the nodal system works. So I had been meaning to make a training series for absolute beginners. So if you have no knowledge of Houdini, then this video should help, and or this series should help because I'm planning to make, like right now I have about 8 videos worked out, and there could be more, I'm not sure, but there are at least 8 worked out. I will put up a web page. I'll do a breakdown of the lessons that I am planning out, and if you want me to add something to it, you can write me an email and let me know. Yeah, but nothing overly complicated. This is a beginner level series, so don't ask me something like how do we build custom forces for volumes. That's not a beginner level question. So yeah, if you have beginner level things that you want me to add into it, I definitely will. Okay, so this particular lesson is going to be relatively sort of bland and boring. What we are going to take a look at in this are a few things. We'll take a look at the interface. We'll take a look at the navigation. Then we'll take a look at the different contexts that exist within Houdini. So just basic functioning, like how the software interface functions. And then eventually we'll make a few objects, add some materials and do a render. So I'll end it with how you can just start functioning within Houdini. Okay. So, and I'll also try and compare the interface with other 3D softwares. So you at least have some reference point, like what is what exactly, whichever software you're coming from. Okay, so to get started, the first thing would be how do you install Houdini or how do you get Houdini? So Houdini for education purposes is free. Okay, so what you can do is, like, if you come to sideeffects.com, you have a button here which says free download. You will need to log in. So just registration is free. So you can either download from, like, the front page itself gives you like a download link if you want. Otherwise, you can click on get and go to download, and that gets you to the download page. And you can either download directly from here, or if you want like the current daily build, then you can sort of come into like daily builds, or you can go to production build. So you can do daily build and then it'll show you whatever is the current daily build. Sometimes the daily builds can have issues. They'll like indicate it with this warning sign over there, but you can download based on what operating system you are in. And if you're an apprentice user, which is the educational version, it's a monthly license which gets renewed for free. So when you install it, it'll take you to like the licensing window and it'll install like an apprentice license for you. So that's how you get the software. Otherwise, if you want to spend money, then you do have an indie version, which is, I believe, $200 annually. And that will let you render without watermarks or anything. Up to animations can be rendered up to full HD, if I am not wrong. And I think stills you can render up to whatever size. But with Houdini Apprentice, I think it's only up to 720p. No, not 720p. I think it's just PAL. I'm not sure. You'll have to like read up that, but there are limitations to the Apprentice. Anyways, it's for education purposes. So, and you also get a watermark if you're using Apprentice, like a small watermark at the bottom right-hand corner which says Houdini. But yeah, I mean, you're getting the full software for free, so you have to deal with a little watermark. That's basically it. Okay, so that's how you get the software. All right, so to get started, okay, so this is Houdini. So this is what Houdini looks like. So if you've never seen Houdini, well, there you go. So firstly, what exactly is Houdini? Well, at a basic level, it's a 3D modeling software, or not modeling, but like I guess the term is DCC, which is digital content creation. So it's the same as Max or Maya or Cinema 4D, the usual stuff, Softimage, Modo, whatever you're coming from. Houdini sort of falls within that same general category. What's different is Houdini has a node-based interface, which like if you're coming from Cinema 4D and you've used like Espresso, then that is node-based. If you're coming from Max, Max has a few node-based things like particle flow is node-based. If you're coming from Maya, then Maya has the hypershade and the hypergraph. And I think there's something you called Mash or Soup. I'm not sure what. I think Mash, but I think one of those is node-based as well. So each software has a little bit of nodal stuff in there. The thing with Houdini is Houdini is entirely node-based, and it also uses something called as, it also has an approach called proceduralism, which I will talk about in another lesson. So not today, but that plays a very important part in what makes Houdini fairly unique in its approach to creating 3D content. Okay, so having said that, let's just take a look at the basic interface and then we'll continue from there. Okay, so when you start Houdini, you get, it looks a little bit like Maya, not exactly, but a little bit like that. Like there are some similarities. So you do get a shelf on top. You have a basic scene view. When you open up Houdini for the first time, your mouse is in navigation mode. So which means that you can just sort of navigate the viewport. Okay, so left click allows you to just orbit, and then middle allows you to pan, and right click allows you to zoom in, zoom out. Okay, so that it gives you into basic navigation mode without having to press any shortcut. Okay, so it's just the mouse. Okay, then you have the parameter window over here, and you have your node view. Okay, so if I just make something temporarily, you'll be able to see it. Okay, so there's your object. Those are the parameters for the object. And then this is the nodal representation of that object. So this is fairly similar. Like if you come to, like, let me just go to Max. Okay. Yeah, this is like no, this is not the Max I want to see. Yeah. Okay. So if you look from a 3ds Max standpoint, let me just make that smaller. Yeah. So sort of similar stuff, right? So you have Max has something called as a command panel on this side, which is your parameter window and other stuff. So which is this, like your parameters window. Max doesn't have a nodal representation, but this can also be viewed in a list view. Okay, so if you come to view, or hold on. Yeah, if you come to tools and say list mode, see, so it shows the object as a list, and which is basically like what you get with Max over here. That's your list view. But yeah, traditionally you don't see Houdini in a list view. You always see it in a nodal way. And then you have your tools on top, which is similar to what Houdini is doing with its shelf. And then at the bottom, you will have your timeline, which is similar over here. So there are, like, at a basic level, there are enough similarities. Like even if you come to Maya, it's roughly the same thing. You have your list view, you have your timeline. I'm guessing this is your animation editor. Okay, but yeah, so viewport, and then Maya has two things. Like Maya has the smaller parameter window, and then it has the bigger attribute editor. So from a Maya standpoint, this is the attribute editor. And again, like similarly from a Cinema 4D standpoint, so it's the same thing. You have a list view, you have your parameter window. This is like the material window for Cinema 4D, which you also get with Houdini, which is called a material palette. So there's that as well. So yeah, so there are enough similarities between the two softwares. Some things are similar, then other things are like very different. But yeah, you get like enough to at least get you started. Okay, so let me just switch this back. I'll go to tools and turn off list mode, and then you're back here. Okay, so this is the basic interface, and then you have multiple tabs. So you have the animation editor, you have the render view, which is like the IPR. So this can do a final render, but it can also be in IPR mode. And there are certain plugins also which support the IPR. So if you have like Redshift or Arnold, then those will work within this window as well. Houdini also has inbuilt compositing. So this is your composite view. And then there's something called motion effects and geometry spreadsheet. I'll talk about these things later, like not right now. Okay, then you can also, like, you have these smaller, tools on this side, and This one is more generalized stuff. So you have your move, rotate, scale. You have snapping tools. And then these are things that you can select. Okay, so you want to select geometry, you want to select camera, you want to select lights, stuff like that. This I'll talk about later, like, because there is a little difference here, but I'll talk about this a little later, not right now. Maybe not even in this class, but we will talk about this. And then on the left, you have other things like you can see the grid, you can turn it on and off. You can, if you have a camera, you can lock the camera to the view. So when you navigate, you'll actually navigate the camera. These are different viewing types. So, you can have normal lighting, you can have advanced lighting, you can have lighting with shadows and ambient occlusion and reflections. So, fancier stuff. You can display materials and objects. So these are other things. And then you have different ways to display your geometry element. So you want to see points, you want to see normals, so you can see stuff like that. Again, I'll come into this in more detail when we start actually making and dealing with objects. But these are for viewing geometry elements. Now, the other thing that I actually like about Houdini is you can actually close these. So if you want more space, you can actually close all of this. Okay, and you can really now you can also do that with Maya, but the nice thing here is that when it collapses, it leaves this small bar, which if you click on, you can open it up again. With Maya, I think you have to right click and then open it. Like you don't, when you close it, it just disappears. Right here, you get this tiny little bar, so you can click on it and then open it up again. Okay, you also get, like Maya, you get a shelf on top. Houdini is pretty huge, like Maya or almost any 3D software. Houdini is a pretty massive software. Okay, so you have multiple things. So you have stuff here which is for creating geometry and then modifying geometry and modeling stuff. And then you have this other shelf which primarily deals with lights, and then it moves from there straight up into your visual effects stuff. So you have collisions, you have particles, you have rigid bodies, you have fluids, you have fire and stuff. So you can create an explosion or a fireball, stuff like that. So you have a lot of stuff here. Okay, you can also make your own shelves if you want to. If you click on the plus, you can download shelves, you can create a new shelf, and you can also add to these shelves. Like I've added RenderMan and Redshift and stuff like that. If I want to, let's say I want to add an Octane IPR, so now I've added Octane IPR. Okay, so you can do stuff like that. Okay, coming on top, this is fairly normal stuff. You have things like you can cut, copy and paste objects and nodes between files. You have some basic interface stuff. Just go through this. There isn't a lot here. There's a fair bit here, but nothing that's a showstopper immediately. We'll come back to it as and how it's important. I don't want to go too deep into this because most days you can just open up and start working. Okay, you don't really have to worry too much about this. Okay, what you can do, however, if you're coming from say Softimage, Softimage is actually the first one where I ever noticed it, where you can actually start off by creating a new project. So if you want to create a new project and put all your data in different places and create a specific folder for that project, you can do it from here. So you'll get different project folders, one for geometry, digital assets, simulation, textures, all of that stuff. Okay, so and then these have been added because I've installed the plugin. So you have Octane, Arnold, Redshift, stuff like that. And then what Houdini also does is that it also gives you different viewports, or sorry, not viewports, but different workspaces. If you use After Effects or even Photoshop, then it has these options on the top over here on the right, where it has different workspaces. Houdini has a similar thing. So if your default, you start with build, but you can change it to animate. So it'll when it changes the entire thing. Houdini almost becomes unrecognizable between the different interfaces. Okay, so you have animate, you have build, you have games. So each one sort of does different stuff. Okay, you can have grooming, I guess, is for hair and fur. See, now you only have hair and fur stuff. You have look development, so you can do stuff like that. Okay, so you get a bunch of stuff. If you want, you can also make a new desktop. So if I come to build And if I say new desktop, so I can start with like a blank screen, and then I can make my own stuff. So if I come in here and I can say shelf sets, so I want to create and refine shelf set. So there you go. And then I want to start off by building something basic. So I have my basic scene view. And then if I click here, okay, on this little arrow on the side, I can do a split pane left and right. So if I click that, see, it will split it. And if I want to split it top and bottom, I can say split top and bottom. So I can do that. There are shortcuts for this. So if you do Alt and the left square bracket, that's vertical. And then if I do Alt and right square bracket, that is horizontal. And you can break it up as much as you want. Like it kind of goes nuts, but you can actually like do, you can actually go nuts with it. Okay, don't do that much, but yeah, you can. Like if you have like a giant monitor or 2 or 3 monitors, I guess you can do that. So now what you can do is, how do you change these is you can right click here on the tab name, and then I want this to be parameters. So this will change to parameters. And then I can right click here and I can change this to network view. Network view is the node view. And so there you go. That's your, absolute basic interface. And then if I want to add more windows or something, I can click here. I can go to new pane, tab type, and I can say I also want the animation editor over here. See, so I can have the animation editor. Okay. Or if I want this here, I can drag and drop it over there. So you can add the animation editor over there. So you have, so it's a fairly adjustable interface. It's not, I think one of the most fluid that I've seen would be like Blender and Cinema 4D. Like those are really fluid. Like you can sort of move things around, do whatever you want with it. Even Modo is a very fluid interface. Like you can do a lot of crazy stuff with it. You can't do that much with Houdini. Like I can't rip out the shelf and put it below. Like that won't work. You can do that with Max. Like you can take any toolbar and put it anywhere. You can't do that here. Okay, but it gives you enough that you can, customize and modify the interface. Okay, so yeah, like even if you have this much, you can pretty much work with Houdini. Like you don't need all the tabs. You can bring them up later as you want. You can also have floating windows. So if you come to window and if you just say new floating panel, you'll get a new, by default it goes to network view. But if you want, you can sort of right click here and then change it to whatever you want. Like let's say this should be a render view. So this will become a render view. Or this should be, I don't know, materials. Let's say this should be like a material palette. So there you go. So you can have a material palette. So whatever you want, you have like these many. You can pick whichever one you want out of that. And you can have multiple of them. So it's not like if this is a material palette, I can't have another material palette. Like if I open up a new floating window and I say this should also be a material palette, then this can also be a material palette. Like that's not an issue. You can very easily do that. And if you want to attach this somewhere, you can drag it and then drop it over there and that will attach. And if you want to delete it, you have like very tiny little X over there. So you can click on that and it will delete it. Okay, with the shelves also you have some amount of customization. Like you can right click on the shelf or you can right click here. You can sort of delete the shelf tab. Don't want to do that. But you can come to like display tools and you can say you want small icons. That's too tiny. You can say display large icons, or you want to see it just as text. I don't do that because then it's just text. I don't like that. Okay, so usually the one I prefer is like large icons and text, which is, which gives you a best of both worlds kind of a thing. You can also add things to the shelf, but we'll do that in a later lesson, like not right now. Okay, so, that's as far as the basic, interface is concerned. Now coming to basic shortcuts. Okay, so by default, as I said, you come into the navigation mode. Okay, but if I press enter, you'll come into selection mode. Now, if you want to navigate from here, because now you're in selection mode, so it's not going to do anything. Okay, so if you want to start navigating, you press spacebar and then spacebar left. Okay, like if you can see it actually shows you shortcuts down here. So it says left mouse tumbles, middle mouse pans, right mouse dollies. Like you do get this very nice little, what do you say? You get this very nice little sort of tool tip down here. So you can also do like spacebar, control alt left box. Wow, okay, that's complicated. So let's try this See, so you can zoom into a specific part. But if you zoomed out too much, then you can press spacebar and H, okay, and that will zoom to the object. So yeah, so spacebar is for navigation. Now you do get an option to change it to like a Maya interface or something like that. Or like a Maya keyboard shortcut. I personally don't like that because like I like to keep it to the native navigation because if you change it, then it sort of screws up the other shortcuts. So it's better to just learn the shortcuts for that particular software. It takes a week, but once you know it, then it's easier, rather than trying to remap it to something that, you've already used. Because remapping then, as I said, it screws up the other existing shortcuts, and then if you're watching a tutorial and then they are using some shortcut, then you suddenly get confused like, oh, that's not working because you accidentally remapped it to something else. So don't do that. Okay, just like learn the shortcuts that are there with the software. Okay, so that's basic navigation. So spacebar, and then left is orbit, and middle is pan, and right is zoom and zoom out. And spacebar H is zoom to object, or actually zoom extends is spacebar H. Okay, then on top here, you also have different modes to display geometry. Okay, so you can have wireframe bounding box, you can have basic wireframe, you can have wireframe ghost, which is like the back stuff becomes like, okay, that's the difference. Like with wireframe, it just everything is dark, and with wireframe ghost, the backside faces become a little more transparent. Okay, so it gives you a depth understanding. Okay, you have hidden line, which gets rid of the back faces altogether. You have flat shaded, you have flat wire shaded, you have smooth wire shaded. You have one basic shortcut, which is W, that goes between wireframe. See, it says toggle wireframe shaded. So that's W. Now, another useful little shortcut that you get is if you press D, that takes you into the display mode. And here's something interesting. Houdini has similar shortcuts which will take you to different things depending where you press it. Okay, so if I press D in the viewport, it takes me for display of the viewport. If I press D here, it opens up something completely different because this is display options for the network view. So when you're pressing D, you want the main stuff, press it in the viewport. Like don't press it in the network view, you will get two completely different things. Okay, so you get a whole bunch of stuff here. Like the basic markers are from here. Like you have, you can see point numbers, you can see primitive numbers, you can see normals. So you have that stuff. You have basic guides. If you want some guides, you have like video safe area, field guides, stuff like that. You have certain visualizers, but we'll talk about that later, like not right now. You have different geometry types, or actually you do different ways to visualize your geometry. So you have like the wireframe width, you can do that. You have wireframe blend, which is blending between shaded and wireframe. It's sort of like an overlay. You have the point size. So if I switch on points, and then I can define a point size, which I think I have to close it. Okay, I think I have to be in geometry mode to see it. Yeah, it probably won't update here. Okay, but you have point size, you have point instance, you have a bunch of things here. You have your basic scene, how you want to see it, and you can have anti-aliasing for the viewport if you want that. So there's that. You have different viewports, and you want to see the name of the viewport. Like by default, it shows the name. See, this is a perspective, so it's showing you the name of the viewport and things like that. It can show you the camera name and all of that stuff. You have different effects, which are these things over here. So diffuse, specular. See, I can turn off specular. You don't want ambient. You don't want emission. Light samples for the viewport. How detailed your lighting should be, whether you want to use the material or not. So things like that. You can just navigate through this. If you want to see a background texture, you can see it from here. You can load up a background texture, and you can load up one for each viewport. Okay, so you want back, left, whatever, you can have different background textures. Displaying textures, and you can optimize stuff. Anyway, so this is and then there are certain things you like, then you can make those changes and save it as a default. So then every time you open up Houdini, it will always go to those settings. Okay, so this is as far as basic navigation and some keyboard shortcuts, like all of those things. Okay, so now before we get into creating objects, there's one major thing I want to try and cover, which is Houdini has these things called operators or managers, or like different contexts for different things, and which is a pretty major thing in Houdini as to how it functions and how it sort of keeps things separate. So what Houdini does is depending upon what you are doing, there will usually be a folder for it, or an area for it. So by default, if you read up here, it says scene. You're currently in scene mode. And if you look at the sphere, it says geometry on top. So this is a geometry node. Now, the interesting thing you can see here is when I select it, it just shows me like move, rotate, scale, and some basic rendering parameters. It's not showing me the sphere parameters, right? Like in Max, when you make a sphere, then you in the command panel, when you go to modify, you actually see like parameters of the sphere. It doesn't show you move, rotate, scale. Like move, rotate, scale comes, like down there somewhere. Okay. You basically see like the radius and the segments and stuff like that, which is actually coming up here right now, but let's not deal with that right now. So the way it works is that this is not, from a Mac standpoint, this is an object. Okay. From a Houdini standpoint, this is a folder. The actual geometry is inside this folder. And what that does is that you can actually keep things, so you can actually have multiple geometry folders. Okay, so you can have, let's say you want to do a car and a building. Okay, so you can have one folder which is the car, and you can have another folder which is the entire building with all the furniture and everything. Okay, and then let's say you want to have a third folder which is the surrounding environment. So you can actually like separate things out based on how you want to work with them. So it not only makes working a little bit easier, but it also allows for a few more advantages which you'll see as we go along. Okay, but that's a pretty important thing. So it's not just for geometry. With Houdini, you get about 5 to 6 different folders or areas within which you can work. So if you click here, it shows you the different networks. Okay, so you have object, which is your scene. Shop is materials. Out is for rendering. Image is for compositing. But these are global folders. Okay, you can actually make like folders at scene level itself. So just to show you, like one of the standard like old-fashioned ways of making objects in Houdini is by pressing the tab key. Okay, so if you press tab, you get a full list of everything that you can make. Now again, the tab menu will change based on where you press it. Okay, so if I press it in the viewport, you see it's a pretty big list. Okay, if I press it in the network view, it's not that big a list. It's a shorter list. Now here's something interesting, right? So if I press tab and I come to geometry, you'll see it basically has some alembic stuff and it just has something called geometry. Like that's basically it. So if I click and create geometry, what you get is this. So which does not really look like anything. It's just a box with XYZ written on it. But you'll see that they both look the same. Okay, like this is geometry over here. The icon type is the same for both of them. Also, if I come to, let's say primitive, okay, and then if I make a box, you'll see like this also says geometry. The icon type is the same. If you come to torus, okay, then again it's created a torus, but again it also says geometry. So these are all individual geometry folders. And what you can do is if you double click on this, then you can see like now I'm at geometry level, and this is the actual geometry. So you can see like here it's become like a folder structure. So you were at scene level, which is object level, and then within that you're in geometry 1. And if you want to go back up, you can just click here, you can go back up. If you want to come inside, double click on this, you can come inside. Another shortcut for it is you can press I, which will take you inside, and you can press U to go up. Okay, but just remember, like enter will take it in. You have multiple shortcuts to do this. You can double click with your mouse. That is the simplest way to go about it. But there you go. Like if I double click on any of them, see now this is the box. Okay, and then you're at geometry level. Okay, and then you have your sphere. So this is, and the interesting that happens now, let me just delete these guys. Okay, is when I press tab here, I'm getting this. Okay, which is like if you can just kind of look at the tab menu. Okay, now if I come into geometry mode and I press tab again, it's a completely different list. So you can see like now I'm getting stuff like test geometry, okay, or terrain. Okay, but if I come out here and if I press tab, you can see like you're getting terrain, but it's just called height field. Like there's nothing else in there. But when I jump in here and I go to press tab and I come to terrain, you can see like you get all of it. So what it does is it filters out things based on the folder that you are in. So when you're in the geometry folder, you will get all the tools for geometry manipulation. When you are in dynamics, you will get all the tools for dynamics. Okay, so just to show you all the various folders or contexts that you get. So you get geometry, and then if you press tab and you come to managers, you'll get the rest of the stuff. So you have, and also you'll get one more in dynamics. So here you go. Okay, so you have a DOP network, which is for dynamics. Then you have a chop network, which is for animation work, so to speak. That's very different. So we'll talk about that later. You have the cop network, which is for compositing. You have the material network, which is the newer, there is something else here called a shop network. So material network is an updated version of the shop network. Okay, so the shop network is not required anymore, but you can still work within it. They both work. ROP network is for render. Okay, so the R stands for render. So as you can see, like these are all the various different, there are a couple more, but I'll just go with 6 right now. So these are the different contexts or folders that you have within Houdini. And then each one, when you go inside, if you press tab, see you get totally different things here. So now you have things like, perform, and like even the import menu is totally different. You have agent, you have object. If you come to device, you have audio in keyboard. So the motion effects area is for manipulating animation data and geometry data in some fairly interesting ways. Okay, so let's not get into that. If you come into dynamics and if I press tab, see now you have like all of the dynamic stuff. So if you come to forces, you have like drag and field and fluid forces and gravity and all of those kind of things. You have constraints. So as you can, and here you can see like now you're in dynamics mode. If I come into material network, you are in something called Vex builder. If you press tab, whoa, okay, it's a pretty huge area. But now you can make materials. Okay, so if I come into, I don't know, like generic shaders, or not really. Okay. Yeah, it's pretty massive. Okay, but yeah, so as I said, like everything changes based on where you are. Okay, these are some render man shaders. And then if you come into the ROP network, then if I press tab and if I come to render, see, so you have Redshift, you have Arnold, you have Mantra is the inbuilt shader for Houdini, and you also have Octane, so or RenderMan, whichever one you want to use. So you have a few things here. So depending on which area you are in, you will get different sets of tools, and in a way that is nice because when you are in that particular context, you just have to worry about that particular context. You don't have to worry about all of it. The other interesting thing is you can also make these folders inside other folders. Okay, so if I want to come into the geometry folder and then if I come to managers, then I can actually make a material network inside my geometry folder. So let's say if I have all of my geometry and I want to keep all the materials for that within that particular folder, so you can actually have folders within folders. So it can seem deep, but in the long run, it also sort of helps you organize things a lot better. Anyways, that's just a fairly generalized overview of how Houdini sort of keeps things separate and the different contexts that exist within Houdini. Alright, so as a final thing for this lesson, we'll just take a look at how to create a couple of objects and then move them around, assign a material, add a light and do a render. Okay, that's basically it. So we won't do anything too complicated, but just to give you an idea of how to function within Houdini. So the way you usually work is don't use the shelf. Okay. The thing with Houdini is you want to try and remember the names of the objects. In the long run, it just makes making things faster. So what you do is, let's say if I want to create a grid, so you can come in here and it's called a grid. Okay, so if you remember that name, what you do is you press tab and you just start typing. So when you type, it automatically sort of shortens the list and you have a grid. Now what you can do is you can directly just press enter. Hold on, let me just do that again. So if I press grid and enter, so there you go, you can directly, it starts to make a grid. You can place it wherever you want or just press enter and it will make it at 0. And then once you've placed it, then you can move it around. So you have your basic navigation. The shortcuts are fairly simple. So E is scale, R is rotate, and T is move. So, T will allow you to move it around, R will allow you to rotate it, and E will allow you to, like you want to scale it in one axis, you can scale it in one axis. Okay. And you can adjust it from here. Like if you want it to be at, everything to be at 0, you can make it at, 1. Yeah. So this is, basic of creating objects. Okay. So if I want to, let's say I want a box and a sphere. Okay. So let's press tab. I'll type in box. Whatever name you're seeing up here is the name you need to type. Okay. So I can take a box. I'll press enter. Okay. And then just sort of pick it up and move it where I want. And then I want to create a sphere. So I can make a sphere. And let's say I also want to create a torus. So as you make objects here, it keeps making like the nodes here. Or if I want, I can create it here. So I can just type in torus and then it'll just give you a node. You won't be able to place it. Okay. But you just, click there and it'll make a torus. Okay. Let me just scale it down a little. Okay. Now, let's say, just for fun, I want to parent the box and the torus to the sphere. So you get and like some basic display stuff. Okay, so this is primarily for selection purposes. So if I turn off the green, you can see like it has two things. It has a green and a blue. Okay, so the blue is for visibility. So if you turn this off, it won't be visible. It also won't render. And the green is for selection. So if I turn this off, see, I can select the rest, but I can't select the sphere. You can select it, you can select the node directly, but you won't be able to select it in the viewport. And the blue, as I said, is just for, hiding it. Now, for parenting, it is again a node-based structure. Okay, so the way it works is you just click on this little dot here and then don't drag it, just click. Okay, and then it'll like a line will connect to your mouse and then just leave it at the, upward dot, at the top dot of the object you want it to be the parent of. Just click there and there you go. And I can do the same thing here. Okay. So this is now a parent of these two objects. So if I select this and I rotate it, see. So that's like your basic parenting. Okay. And if you want to disconnect it, you can click here and drag it out and that will disconnect it. Or another way of doing it is you can keep Y pressed. It will give you like a scissor and then you can just cut it. Okay. So you can do that also. So you have like, 2 or 3 basic options. Now, as a few sort of tools that you have for the network view, okay, you can press L to organize all of it. Okay, so you can do that. If you want to organize just 2 objects or like just a couple of selected nodes, you can select them and then you press Shift L. So it will just organize those 2. Or it will just organize the selected ones. Okay, then up here you have a few options. You can color a few nodes. Like this is just for the network view. It won't affect here. So if I select this and let's say this one should be red. So it's just easier for me to spot it. Okay. You can also make like a network box. Like if this should be put into a folder, I can just click, I can click there. Yeah, so that makes a network box which you can then close or open. You can also give it a name, so this is a network box called test. Okay. Deleting the network box will not delete the nodes. It will just delete the network box. You also get this one very nice thing, which is a shapes palette. So if you want, let's say I want the sphere node to be a sphere. There you go. So you can make it into a sphere, or maybe slightly like an oval. You can do that. Let's say the grid should be like that. It might look a little silly, but the point is when you're dealing with a very massive scene, these small visual cues really help to sort of spot a particular node. So coloring the node and then giving it a specific shape really helps you sort of track it down. Okay, now there are also other things, as I said, like you can see it in a list mode if you want to. You can maximize from here. So if you maximize a pane, it will become full. And when you maximize it automatically shows like a parameter window here, okay, which is an option over there. Like if you come to tools, it says show parameter dialog when maximized. If you don't want to see it, you can turn it off. When you minimize it, it disappears automatically. You can say show operator tree. So this is everything that you have. See, okay. It's like a list view alongside your network view. Okay, the rest of these we'll go through as and how they're required, not at the moment. Okay, so this is creating something basic, as a scene. Now, what we'll do is we'll just add a camera. Okay, so let's say I want a camera from this angle. Let me just see if I can make this bigger. Yeah, and come to this no camera thing written there and just say new camera. Okay, and it by default creates like a 720p camera for you. If you come to view, you can define the resolution and the focal length. So I'll lock the camera to the viewport and then I can just sort of, zoom out a bit. Okay, then remember to unlock it later on. Okay, we can also create a light from a specific angle. So if I come to this angle and then if I come to, let's say I want to add lights into this. So I just want to add lights and camera. Okay, so if I keep control pressed and I click on the point light, you can see it created it from that angle. Okay, see. So if you want a light from a specific angle, go to that angle, keep control pressed and click on that particular light. Okay, so this is a basic point light. I won't go into parameters, but they're not very complicated. You can actually like figure them out on your own, but we will go into it at a later stage. And then let's say I also want to create like an environment light. So I can press tab and type environment light. So this is an environment light. And let's not worry about materials, but let's say I just want to do a basic render, because this will by default it will render gray. So let it do that. Okay, and then I can press tab and I will take a render output. So create like a ROP network. There are other ways to do it. This might, the reason I do this here, like a ROP network over here, is so that everything is at this one scene level. Okay, so it's easy for me to find everything. Okay, there are other ways to make this, but I won't go into it. It just, for me, it feels more confusing. So having it here is I know that, this is my render node. Like this is my render node. I know where it is. Okay, and then double click in here. And you will need to create the renderer that you want to use. So it's like assigning the renderer. So press tab and take mantra. Okay, so mantra is the default one that you want to take. Okay, so just take mantra. No need to make any changes. We'll come to the camera view and I can just click here, come to new paint tab type and take a render view. And then if there is a mantra node, it will automatically select that. See, and you can see it follows the path. So it says obj ropnet1 mantra 1. See, so this is mantra 1. This folder is called ropnet1 and we are in object. Okay, so it's obj/ropnet1/mantra1. The camera, I want to select object camera 1, which is that. And then you can just hit render and it will render it. By default, it will be in like interactive mode, but there you go. That's your basic render. Okay. And this is fully interactive. So if I, let me just get rid of that. I'm going to create a floating window. So I'll take a new floating window, right click, render view, same stuff. And this is fully interactive. So in the sense that if I select an object and I move it around, it will update over there. See. So yeah, so it's pretty decent what you can do with it. So there you go. Okay, so like, all right, so let's just create a material, just to sort of show you. So I'm going to create a material network, and I won't go into it because it's a little more complicated in there. But what I'll do is I'll click on the plus and come to new pane tab and create a material palette. Now in the material palette, you'll be able to spot your folder. Okay, like don't drag it here, like close that, and you'll see you'll have something called obj material net 1. And what you want is the default principal shader. Okay, so we'll create, like, let's say 2 of them, and you can just drag and drop it on the object. And see, you can see it starts rendering it. So if I come in here, if I select it and I make a color change, let's say this is green, see, okay. And let's say this should be for the floor. See, there you go. Okay. So I can maybe create one more. Let's say this should be orange. So yeah, so this doesn't have any material assigned to it, but those two have materials assigned to them. And if you come, like, you'll see that here it changed it to obj material net 1. You'll be able to see your materials. And so you can come, if you click on obj, you'll come back to your main scene. And if you double click on material net 1, you'll be able to see your materials. So let's say if I want to name them something, so this one, let's say we'll call it sphere, and this should be the box, and this will be the grid, okay. Or yeah, whatever. Okay, you can call it whatever you want. Okay. So as a final thing, okay, the way it works is like assigning materials. You can do a drag drop, but what Houdini does is just to see where the material is assigned is if I select the box, and if you come to the render window, see on top you have material, and that's the material it is assigned. And the nice thing is that this is basically a text field. So if I wanted to get the sphere material, I can actually just come in here and type. So if I press SPH and enter, and there you go. So it just switches to that material. So you don't need to, like, you can click here and you can pick as well. But if you know the name of the material, you can just type it. Okay, so if I come to, like, if I select this whole thing, if I do Control C, if I come to the torus, I press Control V and enter, and there you go. Or let's say this one should be box. See, so that gets box. Okay. So you can do stuff like that. So in some sense, in some ways, it's actually a pretty, having those text fields is actually pretty nice. Like you can make those kind of changes very easily. If you don't want it to be a preview, you can turn off that button, okay, which says preview. And then it will come into like a standard rendering view. The current render settings are pretty low. That's why it's very grainy. I'm not going to go into render settings right now. So let it be grainy. We'll worry about that in future lessons. But yeah, that's essentially it. So this is I'm hoping the lesson was fairly understandable, because I think I went through quite a few things. But like I'm thinking this is going to be at least like a 45-minute video. But I'm hoping it will give you a decent overview of how Houdini functions, and just a basic understanding of the interface and some of the navigation and keyboard shortcuts, and just a simple understanding of the various contexts that exist within Houdini, like the dynamics context and the render area and the materials area and things like that. So yeah, so that's basically it. So in the next lesson, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at what makes Houdini unique, which is the nodal system and the procedural approach to to everything. Okay, and what are the advantages of that? Now I have done that once before. Like I have an older video which is called Houdini and Proceduralism. If you want, you can take a look at that. But that was for I believe that was for Houdini 14, if I'm not wrong. So I'll repeat some of those things because the interface has been updated. But the next video should give you a better understanding of what makes Houdini unique. Okay, so that will be if you understand that video, you'll get a better understanding of what Houdini does and what makes it interesting. Okay, so if you have any questions regarding this particular video, if you got confused in some place, just let me know. You can write me an email. And as I said, I'll also put up a lesson breakdown on my website, so you have an idea of what all I will be covering over the next few months. And if you want me to cover anything specific, you can let me know. And if it's not too complicated, or if it's within my level of knowledge, I'll definitely try and add it to the series. But as I said, it has to be a beginner level question. Like, don't throw anything like overly complicated. That's not beginner level. Okay. So yeah, beginner level questions you can send me and I'll add it to the series. So once again, I hope this was clear. And if you have any questions regarding this, you can write me an email. You can ask me on Vimeo. If you can fit a question on Twitter, you can ask me on Twitter as well. Okay. So that's basically it.